right, guys. Hey, here for the second main course. If we're looking at the lectures today here, we're going to be talking about the ideas of Hinduism, specifically what Hinduism sees as the universal problem, the solution that their faith brings, and some of the actual techniques and rituals that go along with how that specific idea works. This one is going to be one that kind of brings things into a full picture, I think, for us. We've talked about already how Hinduism is not a solidified code of beliefs or even a centralized authority around which the beliefs function, how it's very much a regional thing, almost like language dialects. But there is, in some cases, some consensus among the Hindus and the followers here, specifically on what the problem is for humanity as they understand it. For them, the problem is called samsara. And samsara, and I know I'm probably butchering the pronunciation there, but samsara basically translates to the cycle. And the cycle, among most Hindus, they would say, is the fundamental problem in the world which needs some solution. Samsara is the seemingly never-ending cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Now, samsara, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, is a bad thing in the thinking of the Hindu faith, largely because of the concept of reincarnation. The idea of reincarnation comes to the West usually as good news. A lot of times we look at it, for those at least in the West who do believe in it, we look at it as getting multiple chances, coming back in a better life, coming back wealthier, better looking, more powerful. But traditionally in Hinduism, the cycle or samsara is actually horrible, and it's a really bad thing. It's difficult, says the Hindu faith, to get out of, and it is never ending. Meaning the soul, or what's known as the Atman, is eventually going to become tired of repeating this cycle of reincarnation over and over and over. Reincarnation also carries a significant risk because one can be born into various incarnations, ranging from a bacteria all the way to a god or even a demon. It's not guaranteed that you're going to come back good. You can come back as a worm living in a trash dump for however long you go. Samsara is this cycle of reincarnation, rebirth, reincarnation, and there is a severe problem in Hinduism with how do we tackle this. The goal or the solution they call moksha. And moksha is it's a goal, it's a solution, it's a way of breaking the cycle, if you had to put it this way. The main Hindu religious goal is not to get to a better place, like Christianity or Islam. It's to escape the cycle altogether, escape heaven and earth. That solution, escaping the cycle, is called moksha, which means release or spiritual liberation. There are differing conceptions of moksha. There is no consensus on this one in Hinduism, though the idea of escaping or releasing oneself is there. But they have their own opinions on what that looks like or what it means. Achieving the release can look like loving union. For some people, some Hindus, the loving union with a personal god is the end result, where you suddenly become one with the deity that you worshipped. There's also sometimes what's called an impersonal merging, where it involves becoming part of the ineffable essence of the divinity or the larger power in the universe, which is often symbolized by a drop dissolving in the universal ocean, and they call this the Brahman. That's the ocean. They also have another conception of it as paradise. There's a portion of Hindus, ones that are especially influenced by Christianity and Islam, that believe achieving moksha means going to a specific place, a paradise, such as the home of the deities Vishnu or Shiva. When you start talking about solutions, when you start talking about the problems, you can't help but then also figure out, well, if that's the case, how do I achieve that? That's the how-to section here. And the techniques, they boil down to what's called the 3 yogas. The yogas are what actually are meaning discipline. We usually think of yoga in terms of an exercise or a method of stretching and keeping up your health. But yoga as a phrase and as a concept comes from this particular definition and structure. In Sanskrit, yoga means discipline. And they believe there are 3 disciplines, sometimes 4, but as you should be getting used to the idea that nothing is fully solid in Hinduism. There are 3 or 4 disciplines for achieving moksha. Historically, the yogas are related to different phases in the history of Hinduism. But today they're kind of all understood as complementary, meaning you can have everybody participate in one of them or they can participate in all of them. I'm going to kind of break them down for you a little bit. The first yoga is called Karma Yoga. It's called the discipline of action. It's the oldest of the three. Its historical origins come from the early Hinduism when the Vedas were written, and that comes from early 15th century and onwards BCE. It's an early practice in this case, and the idea is that the priests described these concepts in the Vedas, and initially Karma Yoga involved correct ritual, which often centered around fire sacrifice. The Vedas, a collection of sacred scriptures, which basically boils down to hymns, songs, and certain mantras, were revealed to these early Hindus by the gods themselves. And they divided the Vedas up into 4 parts: Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. These mantras and hymns in Hinduism are all part of the collection of wisdom and the divine revelation that's come down through the Karma Yoga. Now, when I say mantras and hymns, in Hinduism, repeating a mantra or a hymn restores order to the world and performs modifications in the universe. It's not just for the spiritual benefit of the person doing it. You are participating in realigning and fixing the broken parts of the universe through performing the mantras and the hymns. Moksha in this phase, only the priests could achieve moksha by performing the rituals perfectly with the correct words and rhythm, which is interesting because in the Karma Yoga then, only certain people are actually able to participate and do it right. Modern interpretation, however, today Karma Yoga is interpreted as performing good actions or fulfilling one's, quote, duty. That's, karma means action. So the action of discipline, or the discipline of action, however you want to kind of phrase it there, comes from the oldest phase, and it's very clearly focused on how do we fix the problems of the universe, and by also doing that, our actions become part of the fixing, therefore do good things. The societal structures that come out of this is kind of interesting, because originally, when you're talking about Hinduism, you can't help but talk about the caste system. And the social structure and the duty of people as a result is very much part of this view of the Vedas as well as the yogas themselves. The caste system is rooted in the earlier phase, the Karma Yoga, and it's described in Rig Veda's Hymn of the Primeval Man. The hierarchy that it casts emerges from a dismembered body of the sacrificial man as a result. And so they look at this and say each parts of this person become the caste that the rest of us exist in. The mouth is the Brahmin, or the priestly caste, the highest level. The arms represented the warrior caste. The thighs represented the merchant caste, and the feet were the Shudra, or the servant caste. The castes are what you're born into, and as a result, the hierarchy of the system is that you do not escape this. All of the parts work together to form a cohesive body of action that is going to right the universe in ways that are beyond any one person. So as a caste, you may be part of something, but your whole participation is what enables the rest of the dismembered body, the primeval man, the Purusha. That's what enables the universe to become right. There are, in this case, also the casteless. The lowest tier is actually what's called the casteless, or the untouchables. They are the only ones who perform the really demeaning jobs, like handling human or animal feces, doing the jobs that nobody wants to do. They are hardly ever seen within the extreme versions of the caste system in India. And this particular version of the caste is also one you can never escape from. So unless you are reincarnated outside of your caste, and even in that case it's fairly uncommon, teaches the certain parts of Hinduism, you are going to simply be outside of the system in that way. There's also the Dharma, which is translated as duty. And these people are born into a caste which establishes what's called an intellectual reality of some sort of predetermined duty, such as priestly obligations. If you perform Dharma as part of your caste, whether you're a mouth, arms, the thighs, or the feet, you perform your Dharma or your duty because of who you are, and performing that duty is necessary to complete and to fully participate in the righting of the universe, Karma Yoga. Okay? So the caste system comes out of that Karma Yoga. It's an ancient system, it's an ancient Veda, and it's an ancient way of trying to fix what's broken in the universe through the actions of the individual. All right, the second of the three yogas is called Jnana Yoga. Means the discipline of wisdom. It's the middle phase. Okay, the historical background here is that it was developed by wandering sages during the BCE eras. Often it was in response to philosophical questions that had been raised by Buddhism. So interestingly, the Jnana Yoga actually is partly a result of interacting with other non-Hindu religions and faith systems. There's a scriptural basis for it. It's based on what's called the Upanishads, which are philosophical dialogues that speculate about existence, about death, and the relationship to the ultimate reality, called the Brahman. How do we relate to the universe and that spiritual greatness that takes over everything around us? It's also focusing on shifting one's personal focus, because ritual kind of takes a back seat in the Jnana Yoga to what's called philosophy. And the ideal is no longer the priest in this case, but rather the sage or the ascetic, who abandons everything in the world to focus on finding the existential answers of philosophy and truth. Within that particular element in the middle phase, you also are able to then achieve moksha. And moksha for the Jnana Yoga is liberation through internal enlightenment of the true nature of the self, rather than external action. Now that sounds like it's a pretty strong difference, because in the earlier yoga, it was all about action. In the next one, the Jnana Yoga, it's all about nature of the self and understanding your true internal enlightenment. You can see how moving through these different yogas all at once or focusing on an individual one could definitely change how you practice your Hindu faith. And it does. Depending on how you've been brought up and how you understand these different yogas, you will look quite different from some of the other Hindus that are within other parts of the world. The key concepts for Jnana Yoga are karma. In this context, karma refers to the consequences that follow actions, good or bad. Okay? Karma is described as a baggage that is going to be weighed at the end of life, and it determines the quality of your next reincarnation. It's an attempt to see some sort of justice in the universe that is based on whether or not you did good or bad things in this lifetime. The Atman, or the soul, in this case, carries the karma onwards into another life, and it is in that karma, or that Atman with the karma, is what achieves release during the moksha. Okay? Atman is there to be released back into some sort of a universal fixing, and the techniques for doing so revolve around meditation, breath control, yogic positions that are becoming essential for attaining wisdom and for focusing the mind. This version of the Jnana Yoga is actually what you're probably seeing if you interact with yoga as a discipline for yourself, whether it's a meditational system or whether it's just for exercise. You're probably interacting with Jnana Yoga, the disciplines of wisdom, because these positions, these practices are all about focusing the mind and keeping the outer distractions at a minimum. The external fire of the ritual is then replaced by an internal fire, which these practices create in Jnana Yoga. So you've got the earlier yoga there, the yoga that is focused on the externals, the Karma Yoga. Then you've got the Jnana Yoga, which is focused on the internals. And then finally, you've got the third yoga, the Bhakti Yoga. And that's called the discipline of devotion. That's the one that is most prominent in modern times. The chronology and the background for it became really popular in the Common Era, about 1000 to 1800 CE, and it's the most prominent form of Hinduism practiced today. It is democratized, meaning the discipline emerged due to the demand for some sort of a democratization of moksha. Previous methods, whether ritual or aesthetic in the life, excluded the commoner. See, if you're going to truly achieve moksha in the other two yogas, you were usually from the upper classes. You were gifted into a certain level of caste, which enabled you, just through your birth, to be a part of the solution to the universe. That kind of went pulled back, because what that does create is an unnecessary distinction between the good and the bad people, the common and the uncommon. The technique for Bhakti Yoga here is achieved by devoting oneself, the Bhakti, to one of the gods and building a relationship with that deity. Moksha is then a fixing of the universe by creating a connection between you and the divine. The common person then can also achieve moksha with the help of the gods without ever having to leave their social responsibilities. And that's an interesting extra here, right? This comes around right at the same time as we see other forms of revolution springing up during the Western histories. If you start looking at when and where different traditions and different people groups in the West started rising up against the systems that had oppressed them for centuries, it's not surprising that the Hindu faith also went through its own time of the bottom up resistance by the commoners. So the practice for Bhakti Yoga is largely characterized by an obsession with the stories of the gods. Mahabharata, Ramayana, lots of songs and poems and dances, dramas and offerings. They are all part of this external veneration of the deities in a variety of different versions. The practice here is Bhakti Yoga, devoting yourself to a particular divine element or a god, and then establishing and continuing the relationship with that deity. Now, if we're looking at some of the major deities, we've talked about the yogas, we've talked about what they are, but we haven't talked a whole lot about the actual deities themselves. You could never talk about all of them, and that's just the truth of it. There is, however, certain levels, ones that are kind of common to all the different versions of Hindu faith, but these are the ones that kind of, they're at the top. Brahma is called the creator god. He's the literal most ignored of what could be termed the Hindu Trinity. There are three major ones that kind of are becoming, for most Hindus, are the big ones. The Brahma is the creator, but he's more ignored mostly, with very few actual temples in the world dedicated just to Brahma. Vishnu is called the sustainer god, and then there is Shiva, the destroyer god. Within those three, you will usually find lots of different external temples or ceremonies or adherents that are focusing on those particular deities. There's also three different major forms of Bhakti Hinduism, which is kind of talking about the prominent trinity or the Hindu trinity here. There's Vaishnavism, which is the worship of Vishnu. Super popular because Vishnu is literally the most popular Hindu god among most of the faithful. The avatars of Vishnu, he's got about 10 different incarnations, which are mostly Rama. Ramayana is a hero, and then Krishna, which is the Mahabharata hero. Buddha is also considered, actually, interestingly, an incarnation of Vishnu. So it's an interesting little piece there. The worship of these individual gods breaks down into almost sub-religions within the Hindu faith. So think of these as like subcategories, or at least sub-personalities within the larger Hindu perspective. Shaivism, or Shaivism, is the worship of Shiva. And the personality of Shiva, which literally means friendly, is depicted with conflicting personalities, interestingly. He can be both the destroyer and he can be loving. He can be the happy child, the not happy. He can be male or female. I say he, but literally it's a little bit ambiguous in that sense. Shiva is the central deity for the city of Varanasi. Anybody who dies in Varanasi achieves immediate moksha because Shiva is there to help him. The worship of Shiva is also just part of a larger particular picture here, and we do have some sub-deities that kind of go along with that. One of those is a worship of a god called Shakti, or Shaktism. This is considered to be the great goddess, and she represents the feminine energy that animates all of the other divinities. You have lots of incarnations of the Shakti, gentler forms associated with prosperity and good luck, but then there's also a dark and wild incarnation named Kali, which is called the goddess of death, the cremation and the battlefields. So you have a lot of contrasts within any individual deity within Hinduism. It's interesting that you can have this version of them and that version of them. There's two warring sides to every one of the deities. Another big one here that I wanted to end with is Ganesh, or Ganesha. And the role of this god is this is the god of good fortune and the remover of all obstacles. Sometimes they call it the god of new beginnings. And the worship is highly popular here because, frankly, if you worship the god of fortune, the god of the remover of obstacles, dude, that means you are actually going to also benefit from good fortune and having your obstacles removed. Highly popular worship. Hindus often offer items or prayers to Ganesh when they start a new day or a new endeavor, such as a business or a marriage or just anything. If you move somewhere and you're starting over, you are going to make sure that you throw a couple of extra tokens of affection towards Ganesh. This is part of the Hindu faith in a major way. It's part of Bhakti Yoga, right? The Bhakti Hinduism says you devote yourself to the divine, you devote yourself to one of the gods, and you will then receive the good things from those gods. So this is kind of a general idea. Again, we've gotten some specifics in here, what the basic idea, the problem that is being fixed, samsara, the cycle of life and death and rebirth. You've got the solution, which is moksha, bringing about a fixing, an escape of the cycle of reincarnation. And then finally, you've got the actual practices through the yogas and the different deities and the veneration of those deities. I hope this has been informative and instructive. The videos and such will also kind of get you in touch with some of the ideas here. Again, my warning at the beginning still stands. For a Western world and a Western society that's used to Christianity and Judaism and Islam and some others, this is going to sound very flexible and amorphous. And it just truly is. But at the same time, it's one of the world's oldest religions and is very, very common. So you will run into it within your medical practice. There's always going to be certain things to know, certain things to know. Personally, my best approach whenever dealing with Hindu families has always been to allow them to tell me what they're all about and what they're like. I will generally ask them, what deities do you observe, or what practices do you participate in on a local basis? And then the doors just open because they realize, he at least has some idea here. A little bit of information offered as a question will always be able to get you through the door. Thank you guys for listening here. Make sure you finish out the rest of the modules, and have a great day.